It's a big day today. I actually combed my hair, so I look like Lord Farquaad. So what I want to talk about today is the idea of, I guess, maintaining a friend group as you get a little older. Not that I'm, ancient. I'm not exactly coughing up dust yet, but we're well on our way. So the thought is, or my thought is, right, so when you're younger, when you're in elementary school or when you're in high school and then later university, you, or most people, have like a pretty fleshed out group of friends, or if it's not like a lot of people, you have people you spend time with, right? Because you're forced into proximity, right? You go to school, you have to, or you go to, extracurriculars, whatever that is. For me, that was sports, right? You're put in situations where you're continually in contact with people in a similar life position, of a similar age, right? A lot of the times a similar sort of walk of life, because you're in the same area. And all of those things come together to push you together socially. So there's almost no choice but to be spending a lot of time with other people, again, who are in a similar sort of situation to you. And you form friend groups and you form, relationships and whatever else. And that's a real constant of your life from the time you can remember, right? From the time you start going to kindergarten, really until you get towards the end of university. And then there's a very drastic change. So that everything I just said, that sort of cauldron, that sort of amalgamation of people of similar walks, is true up and through university. And while you're in university, you're in a very strange sort of transitive state where you're becoming fully realized in all of your responsibilities as an adult. Like, you're living on your own, you have time commitments, you have a certain responsibility to go out into the world and do things, but at the same time you're still in this almost juvenile setting where everybody around you is, again, for the most part the same age, doing the same things in the same routines, right? So that social networking is still easy. It's still beyond easy. It's still forced. And then when you leave university, that completely flips. When you leave university, a couple of things happen. The first is there's usually a spreading out, right? Like, everybody doesn't graduate university and stay in the town the university is in. And I'm saying university this whole time. This could be interchanged for high school. This could be interchanged for middle school, whatever the last level of structured schooling you were in, because that was the last time you were in this situation where you were pushed together with a bunch of people in the same age, right? But once that concludes, people kind of spread out, right? Whatever tight group you were in disperses. And that could be, and largely is, geographically. People go to a bunch of different cities and whatever else. And people also go into a bunch of different life situations, right? Some people go and become freaking chemists. Some people will go and write. Some people will go into construction. Like, some people go all over the place. You're no longer all working within the same set of parameters. So whatever friend group you have or had is going to diversify, which is fine. That happens at many points in your life. You don't generally keep the same group of friends through your entire life. That's not a super common thing. But what changes is you're not then going to a place where that can immediately be recouped, right? So if you go from middle school to high school, all of your middle school friends spread out and do different things, and your friend group will change, but then you're immediately in another situation where all of the people around you are in high school, and you can start the whole process again. You're immediately back, or close to immediately back, into another friend group, right? Once you're done your last level, though, that's no longer the case, because you'll enter into a job, usually, right? And whatever it is you're doing, it's not necessarily a bunch of people of the same sort of ilk that you are, right? It's not necessarily people of the same age, or who have the same interests or do the same things or really have much in common with you besides your place of work. And if that's not the case, if the job you go to has a bunch of people who you connect with really easily, then that's fantastic and more power to you. But that's not something you could necessarily expect for yourself or for others. So, not that anything I say is particularly based in reality, but especially from here on out, this is something I kind of have yet to experience. So this is me talking basically about what I'm making up in my head, but my understanding of how things used to work versus how they work now. So in previous generations, prior to the internet and people generally residing largely in an online space, this wouldn't be as much of an issue because you would go to bars, or you would go with your coworkers, or you would go golfing or whatever. You would take the steps necessary to sort of find that inclusive space for you again, because there was almost nothing else to do. What else are you going to do, right? People generally do not isolate themselves unless there is some reason to do so. Whereas now, it's really all too easy to stay in your own room, right? It's way too easy to sequester yourself to your video games or to your social media or to whatever it is, and you come home from work and you just stay in your room. You don't go searching for anything extracurricular because your social needs are met enough, right? Just to a very minimal level that you don't feel the need to go out and seek more, and you don't feel almost beholden to your own social needs, but you're not fully satisfied and fully realized in what you want as far as a social network goes either. So it's a bit of a dangerous trap, at least in my eyes, in my thoughts. And because that's no longer so heavily incentivized, again, because it's a lot easier, I think it's easier than it's ever been to be by yourself, the process stops. The process of, I move to a new place or a new life situation, all of the people I used to talk to, or most of the people I used to talk to, disperse, and now let me coalesce a new group of people that I talk to and hang out with. That process stops. So the dispersion doesn't stop, because that's always going to happen, but now you're in a situation where I haven't gathered a group of like-minded, similar people that I hang out with all the time anymore, right? That's not something that's true for you. And it can lead to people feeling socially very stuck, right? Because I don't know how to go out and meet people. I don't know where to go out and find this social constant that's been with me since the time I was 4 years old. And I feel very different, emptied almost without it. So now take this from somebody who is 25 and therefore knows everything that there is to know. I'm pretty sure there are two ways out of that situation. And the first is to turn back the clock a little bit and go and engage with the outside world as best as you can. So if you're into dancing, you go and find dance groups, right? And then if you're into sports, you go and find a rec league that you can play in, right? Go and find something. Try to put yourself in that similar environment that you used to be forced into, where there's people around you sharing a similar interest who are in a broadly similar walk of life. And I think from there, things sort of take care of themselves. And then the second one is you get married. I think the second one is you get married, you start a family, and that becomes, to a large extent, your social network, right? Because you don't really have room for a lot else. And this is something, or this might be you, but depending who you are, this could be what you see a lot of your friends do, right? You leave university, you have people that move in with their significant others, and they get married, they start a family, and they withdraw from the social circles that you've been able to maintain because that's their priority now. And it's absolutely reasonable and almost expected for them to do that. I'm not saying that that's to be looked down upon in any way, or that you should be frustrated with those people in your life, but it's a fact, right? It's one of the ways out of this social dilemma. You'll notice that I gave two answers, and neither of them were continue to connect with the same friend group that you've had. And that is not an impossibility. if that works for you, if that's something you can do, then that's amazing. That's great. I think that's awesome. But I also think that's something that's a little bit rare just because of that whole dispersion thing that I talked about. I think it's almost unrealistic to expect that you can have all of the same people that you hung out with in high school or in university or whatever, and still interact in the same way, because you guys are going to all go different directions, right? It's just human nature. Not everybody's going to do the exact same thing. So if it does work, sure, but it's not something I would say that you can count on. As for which of those two options is superior, I really can't comment. I think it depends entirely on the person that you are, but I do really think one of the two or something close to it is necessary, because I think a person in social isolation is extremely tried. I'll say it's a very difficult thing to go through. It's not something I think we were designed to be able to go through. I kind of think that you need to have other people in your life. Not I kind of think. You need to have other people in your life. You need to have people that you can talk to, that you can express yourself emotionally, mentally to. You need to have some output beyond the four walls around you. And again, depending on the kind of person that you are, that could be going and starting a family, that could be going and joining pottery class, right? As long as it's something. The defining and difficult line here is, I think that there has to be a little bit of willingness to accept that the past will not continue as it was. Very simply, you're not going to have all of the same things, and unfortunately all of the same friends and situations as you had, right? And again, maybe you will, maybe you could. If you do, that's amazing, but it's not something I think most people will have. And that's okay. Change is good and necessary, and you might find yourself in a better and more desirable situation because of it. The difference is that it becomes harder because it has to be self-driven. Before, you got put in high school and you got put in a bunch of classes, and maybe you put yourself in sports, but it was a lot easier. You were forced into these places where these things develop organically, whereas now you have to actually take the steps to manipulate your own environment and push yourself into these situations by yourself, right? Say, I'm going to take my own initiative to go and put myself in like a rec hockey league, even though I haven't skated since I was 12, but I think it could be something interesting. I think it could be something fun. Right? Or I'm going to go to, like I said, a pottery class. I'm going to go bird watching, something. But force yourself to get out of your room and go and find maybe not like-minded people, but like-habited people, right? And it's not always going to work, and it could be awkward. You could have a lot of bad experiences with it, right? You could go to something and you're like, this is crap. I had no fun. This was a waste of, half of a Saturday or whatever it was. But you got to break a couple eggs to make an omelet, and I think if you do that enough times, you're going to find yourself somewhere where you're a little bit better off, somewhere where you have people around you that you can recapture that same sort of social dynamic with. The last thing I'll say, and this is strictly with respect to friends you might have already had, right? A social network that you have had previously, but now you find is crumbling a little bit. I would say, be willing to reach out. Be willing to be reached out to, because chances are other people in your friend group or social network are feeling the same way that you are, right? Or they're missing hanging out with you, or they're missing talking to you in the same way that you're missing talking to them, and you really want to set something up with them. So be willing to be the person to take that first step, because it's difficult to do, but it might be a very desired first step. And the second thing that I would say is, while being willing to take the first step, know when to stop pushing, right? And this is a really difficult one, and this is one I've definitely been on the wrong side of. And it's not like it's inherently bad, but if you have somebody that you used to hang out with a bunch, and you're like, oh man, I really like hanging out with them. I want to hang out with them again. And you reach out and you're like, hey, let's set something up. Let's go get drinks, whatever it is. And they're like, oh, yeah. Or, this doesn't work for me, but like maybe this time. And they just generally are flaky about it and deflect and whatever. And then, so that doesn't happen. But then you loop back around like a month later. You're like, oh, let's do this. And it doesn't happen. You loop back around a month later. you can only do it so many times. At some point, if they wanted to make it work, they would have made it work, right? And that sucks. It especially sucks if it's somebody you want to spend time with. But you can't force people to do anything against their will, right? So if you loop back around a whole bunch of times and it's still just going nowhere, then all right. You know, it's time to stop wasting your energy on that. It's time to go and try to push yourself forward as opposed to try to pull them with you. So that sounds very, like, blunt, stark, drastic. I don't know. Very harsh, I guess is the words. But I don't mean it in a malicious sense. It's just, unfortunately, a part of being a human is, like, things will change. It can be great, it can suck, but it's going to happen. Things are going to change. And that's just one aspect of that in your life. I think that's everything I wanted to say on this. It's not easy. You will never catch me saying it's easy. Navigating the social realities of this modern world, it's very challenging in a lot of different ways, and I don't think there's any absolute right answers. But I think having a general idea of what's happening and why can help. And again, I think the biggest thing is just put yourself in positions where something can happen. And this is something I struggle with a lot. But nothing's going to happen in your room when you are talking to a camera, right? So the moral of the story, I guess, is don't be me. And I'm going to go ahead and take that advice. So I will be back tomorrow.